Well, I wasn't expecting to do this, but after seeing this video by Hasan Piker and second thought, I knew I had to say something. If you don't know, Hasan is a political streamer that's always wrong, and when he's called out on his crap, he calls you a racist transphobe. He also steals content. I don't know anything about second thought, but after watching this video, I know he's an idiot too. He essentially tries to use the United States past to justify them being bad as if we're in an RPG and we have an alignment chart. Now, as someone who loves history, I think as a rule of thumb you should never view the past with a modern lens because times have changed greatly. But also, I don't think you should use the past sins of a culture to justify your hatred for them in the modern day, because there's not one good culture in the world. Like, if you want to do that, then Japan and Germany are the two most evil countries in the world because of World War II alone. But I know leftists would get upset if I say that. So, let's just get into this. Warning right now, this actually might make you dumber as a person, so watch with your own risk.
Anyway, here's second thought. Are we
This
the
episode
baddies?
and others like it are brought to you by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon.
And I've been asked directly, would you do it again? If you give me the same circumstances, I would not hesitate.
Are we the baddies?
Honestly, I could just leave it at that. Not great. Okay, friends, today we're going to tackle a big topic, and one that might make my fellow Americans a little uncomfortable if you haven't grappled with this stuff before. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a quick disclaimer, because I know I'm going to get a ton of misguided comments. I am not anti-American in the sense that most self-professed patriots would use the term. I love the land, I love my neighbors, and as a Texan, you better believe I love Whataburger. I am anti-American in the sense that I do not support the United States as a political project, a nation founded on genocide, theft, and...
Why is this, like, the first stance every left-leaning person takes when they talk about America? Look, what happened to the natives was horrible, but it is no different than what happened to every other country in the world. In Utah alone, the Native American tribes were waging war against each other long before the white man showed up. This is the most brain-dead, horrible argument the left always makes about America that just tells me they don't know history. If you want to believe that the United States was founded on genocide, then every other country, continent, culture, etc. in the world has at one point or another participated in genocide. Be that a cultural genocide where they just forgot their old ways, or they just murdered the indigenous people on the land. There is not a single country in the world that has not at some point had a very violent history. I'm not justifying anything, but every time I hear these arguments, they're coming from people who don't know their history. What makes these arguments even funnier to me is if you have this strong disgust at living on stolen land, move. Go somewhere else. Sell that land back to the natives. Like, I know that's a basic argument too, but like, you clearly think it's immoral for white folk to be living in the US, so go somewhere else. As for slavery, again, look at every other fucking country in the world. That's more a thing that existed in other cultures than genocides. Again, these are the worst takes to make against the United States. Every country, group, culture, etc. has had slavery. Even the Native Americans had slaves. They would just take captives from a rival tribe and enslave them. This is not some revelation. You're not waking people up to this. If you just read one chapter of a history book on any other culture or country, you will find that country more than likely had slaves, and a lot of slaves at that. I am not justifying anything. This is just how history is. It's not an argument against a country or a culture or anything. It's an argument that people make when they don't have an actual argument.
That's it. All right, click away, brother. This commie's gay, okay? At first, I thought to myself, there's no bisexual lighting. So after he said to me that he's from Texas, I thought maybe it's a patriot. And then I saw that he said he's not a part of the American Global Project. And I realized then, excuse me, there is nothing more American than advocating for endless empire, ceaseless empire, 800 military bases around the world.
Oh, Hasan, you big steaming pile of stupid. The United States is not imperialistic. They don't have an empire. Those bases are mostly in countries that have U.S. assistance, or a country the U.S. was at war with. Again, this is not even an argument. The world relies on the U.S. to be the police of the world. It's not an empire. The U.S. isn't taking over other countries and claiming land.
so that Raytheon can turn profit year after year. Profits that it won't even trickle down to its own goddamn engineers, brother. That's what America is about. America is about $5 jalapeno poppers and my dick not working because my food is actual garbage. Because, again, big mega corporation.
You're a multimillionaire socialist. You live in a gated community in a mansion with expensive cars. And you're going to complain about megacorps? I guess that's on par for socialists, actually. All animals are equal, but I'm more important than you and deserve more.
That are fancying themselves, they're working on the agricultural production side and also on food, have lobbied the government endlessly to ensure that they cut costs as best as possible and feed me poison. But that's goddamn delicious poison, and I'll kill you if you ever try to take that away from me. America is about me having severe health complications like diabetes and then not being able to pay for my insulin because, goddamn it, brother, we got other priorities that never seem to help me out. I don't know what the priorities are, really. I don't know who's really getting helped out. Maybe the corporate bottom line, but there is an America out there spiritually that's dominating, and it makes me feel good. It's all
What is this unhinged rant? What's going on, dude? This is insane.
good that I got incredibly high blood pressure and my don't work, and I can't go to a goddamn doctor because the last remaining rural hospital is a helicopter ride away. Turns out it wasn't profitable for there to be a hospital there, and guess what? That's goddamn all right because I'm American. I'm proud to be a goddamn. That's what being a patriot's all about, because I can have a gun, and
I was wondering when that would come up. You need help, man. Holy crap.
can purchase that gun at Walmart. And I can have my 10-year-old play with that gun at home because I don't need a lock and key. And when that 10-year-old learns the hard way guns are really like, maybe he shoots his sister in the face, but guess what? Didn't like her that much anyway. Her vibes were... And sure, I shot my dick up.
Seriously, he's just going on and on and on and on. Like, holy crap, dude, this has nothing to do with the 40-second clip you've played.
Off to one time, but that's all right. I don't need it anyway. The poison I've consumed has already destroyed my penis before I...
What's with you constantly talking about penis? That's weird. Like, really weird. Even if you are gay. I'm straight, but I don't talk about boobs all the time, so what's up with that?
shot myself in the penis to begin with. So,
no, stop. This is just weird. Is that your kink? That's not what having your dick blown means.
Didn't make much use of it regardless, but god damn it, that's what being an American is about. All right, let's get back to this gay comment now.
Slavery has no right to exist, and certainly has no right to act as an occupying force all over the world, dictate trade agreements, fund proxy wars and death squads, foment coups, and generally act as a barrier to self-determination and genuine freedom.
Congrats. You've learned how the world works. Is this like a hot take or something? You really think the United States is the only country in the world that participated or profits off slave labor?
When people say things like, "You're not patriotic," I find it a little disingenuous, because what could be more patriotic than recognizing your country's flaws and working to build a better society?
That's exactly what patriotism is. But what you're saying is not patriotic, it's an uninformed or uneducated take.
Anyway, this is a massive topic. There's no way I can even mention all the crimes the US has committed, so I'm gonna leave a bunch of resources in the description if you'd like to learn more. We'll start at the beginning, with the genocide of the Native Americans.
Oh, golly gee, I'm sure this is going to be a perfectly unbiased account of what happened during the various US Indian Wars, and is totally going to talk about the various struggles between various tribes.
When Europeans first laid eyes on what they called the New
You mean the general lie, brother?
World, it's estimated there were around 15 million indigenous people living in North America. By the end of the 19th century, there were just 200,000. 14.8 million people were killed by these foreign invaders who, without any sense of self-awareness, considered the native population savages. Perhaps the most infamous period of the genocide is known today as the Trail of Tears, which lasted from 1830 to 1840.
Excuse me, that seems quite a bit like a peaceful transfer of a indigenous population. Yeah, sure.
Oh dear God, here here we go, another unhinged rant.
A lot of people died in the process, but the ultimate goals are they're away from the conflict, right? Why did the conflict begin? Well, let's not talk about that too much. What you have to remember is the white civilizing force there peacefully. Yeah, Trail of Tears, tears of joy, brother. That's a good one. Exactly. Yeah, what do you mean? They never specified what kind of tears. They were joyful tears. They were saying, thank you, white man, for moving me away from the conflict.
Initiated.
I don't even know what point he's trying to make here. I know he's trying to sound like what he thinks a conservative is, but he's too stupid to understand why the Trail of Tears happened. Actually, both of them probably are. I'm not justifying why the Trail of Tears happened. That was horrible. But this isn't technically a genocide. It was an ethnic cleansing, which is horrible, but they're not the same thing, so don't confuse the two.
By President Andrew Jackson, a war criminal and slavery enthusiast, and approved by the United States.
Okay, I admit I've never heard this one before, but Andrew Jackson, a war criminal? I've legit never heard this before, and I can't find a source that would dictate him a war criminal. Was he a racist even by the standards of the time? Sure, we can argue that, but a war criminal? Can you provide a source on that? Or are you just saying that because he removed Native Americans, which at the time would not be a war crime?
States Congress had the explicit goal of removing Native Americans from the land the U.S. was currently colonizing, and relocating them across the Mississippi. The problem was, most of these people didn't want to leave their homes. So, naturally, the U.S. butchered as many as it took until the native population complied. The actual relocation process was incredibly dangerous, and thousands of people died of disease, starvation, or exposure to the elements. Of course, that was of no consequence to the US government. They had achieved their goal. Vast new swaths of land to colonize and turn into farmland to be worked by an army of slaves. In the 247 years since its inception, the US has been at war for all but 17 of them.
Is that supposed to be a gotcha moment? That's not a great argument. Look at England. They've been warring with their neighbors for fucking ever. This is not an argument to make about a country being bad. This is a bad faith argument. It's not even an argument. Look at any country in the world. There's a good chance they've been at or around war just as long as they've existed. It's not an argument. It's just a statement or a fun fact.
The country sees itself as the world police.
No, we are the police because all our allies in various third world countries beg us for their help with everything.
The shining city on a hill that has the moral responsibility to enforce our conception of society on everyone else.
That's just not what's happening, though. I guess you could argue that maybe we tried to force our way of life in Afghanistan and Iraq, but we only give aid because other countries beg us for help and give us tons of money to get that help. And that's assuming we're even getting money to help them. We administer billions of dollars of aid to other countries and don't get anything back in return. Because that's just what the US does.
This country talks a big game about the importance.
Okay, I don't think he understands.
I was a little excited and hoped that he was going to actually call him out. But nope, he's just an idiot.
Okay, I don't think Second Thought understands that our conception of how society should be designed just simply always ends up benefiting our bottom line. And not even the American bottom line across the board, but the bottom line of American corporations and corporate owners. And it just happens to be that way every time. What are the odds, guys? It just happens to work that way. And we're not haphazardly slapping that sticker on as a idiotic justification. You know what I mean?
What are you even trying to say? I don't even know what your point is supposed to be. Are you trying to say that the US will only help people because they'll get a big fat paycheck? The US is one of the most charitable countries in the world and delivers aid to other countries all the time. The US isn't actually getting paid for that all the time. I know you don't understand this because you're a millionaire socialist, but the US administers aid to thousands of people every day, helping as best as they can.
The United States has never once embodied those values. One early example is the Philippine-American War. At the end of the Spanish-American War, the United States annexed the Philippines.
How about the annexation of the top of the hour ad break? Nobody's talking about
Was that supposed to be funny?
that.
The United States, a country halfway around the world, said too bad. By the US State Department's own admission, the resulting war killed some 20,000 Filipino combatants and over 200,000 civilians, with some estimates going as high as 1 million people.
I'm gonna need a source on that one, Chief. Look, that was a bad war. I'm not gonna deny that. That was a bad thing. But I need a source on 1 million people being killed, because historians agree it was only 200,000 people, which is a lot less than 1 million.
Another island nation was ready to surrender to the Allied powers. At the very end of World War II, Japan was thoroughly beaten. But even
No, they weren't. Actually, quite the opposite. They were not beaten. They were very much still able to fight. They were willing to have every last man, woman, and child pick up arms because their culture did not believe in surrender. This is the left-leaning version of history. Japan was not about to surrender. There's some theories they were considering it when the Soviet Union decided to get in on the action in the Pacific, but they were not going to surrender. They knew that if the U.S. wanted them to end the war, the U.S. was going to have to surrender to them. Japan was an island. They had the home field advantage. If the U.S. or even the Allies attempted to invade, it would be a slow, bloody, brutal conflict. In fact, every single Purple Heart medal, or at least most of them, are relics from World War II. The U.S. knew that this was going to be brutal, so they made and advanced millions of Purple Heart medals for the up-and-coming conflict. It never happened, thankfully, so they just give the medals to wounded soldiers in every war after. This is why I know this guy does not know his history, because if he did, he would know that Japan was not about to surrender. And okay, fine, even if Japan was 1 hour away from opening peace talks, it doesn't matter, because until that dialogue is established, you're still at war.
Even though the Allies were just beginning to celebrate victory, the United States had already set its sights on a new geopolitical and economic rival. The Soviet Union had grown from a pre-industrial backwater to the second most powerful nation on Earth in less than 50 years, and the US didn't want them to get any ideas. So on the 6th and 9th of August 1945, the United States dropped nuclear bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Oh, no. The US did not create nukes and drop them on Japan to show the Soviets they had these toys. It was 100% a desperate attempt to get Japan to surrender. Oh my god. The US and the Soviets were still allies at this time. The Cold War didn't even start until 2 years later on the 12th of March 1947. The entire reason nukes were created in World War II was because Germany was trying to make nukes. The US wanted nukes to try to get one up over the Germans, and the Soviets were trying to get nukes to get back at Germany for what Germany had done to them. Look, it's a long and complicated history. Japan surrendered for 2 primary reasons, the nukes and the Soviets. The Soviets had a non-aggression pact with Japan, but they broke it at the request of the Allies, so they were going to come in. Japan was considering peace talks, but never went through with that until the bombs were dropped. Japan was fully ready to wage an ongoing bloody war for years on their own home turf.
Vaporizing over 200,000 civilians. There are those who attempt to justify the bombing.
I honestly hate saying this, but it was justified. Because the alternative was a completely and utterly destroyed Japan. Its culture removed, its people dead. This was, horribly enough, the best case scenario. But because you do not know your history, you think it was bad because you don't bother actually doing any research. And you give idiots like Hasan more fuel and misinformation to spread to their brain-dead audiences who are too stupid to know anything other than the garbage spewed by retards.
Weeb.
That it saved countless lives by ending the war.
American arguments that justify American actions are so funny. It's always like, you don't understand, the firebombing was far worse. What do you mean?
Hasan, stop talking. You justified Hamas murdering and raping and killing hundreds, if not thousands of people on October 7th. You've argued for Hamas, a terrorist organization. You applaud them. But no, please, do tell me how American arguments on a subject you clearly have no idea about are bad.
Okay, well, who was doing the firebomb? We were doing that too. You don't get it. It was a de-escalation. It was a de-escalatory bombing campaign.
Yes, it was. It was to stop the war.
It's always for an earnest, good thing, okay? America doesn't simply just, show off its cool toys as a flex to its potential future foreign adversaries, right? Like, that would never happen.
It is misguided at best and an outright lie at worst. Japan was ready to...
No, they weren't. They were considering it. There's a difference. There were not peace talks happening. There were ambassadors waiting to get confirmation for having peace talks, but there was no order or agreement for peace talks to happen. Until you have surrendered, you are an enemy still.
to surrender. This is an established fact. But perhaps more damning than that is the fact that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were chosen not because they were military targets, but because they were population centers. And what better way to scare a geopolitical rival than to say, we're willing to kill this many civilians in an instant to get what we want?
Nagasaki was a port. That was where Japan was building its navy. Also, the city had not been touched by bombs yet. The whole thing was a test, a disturbing test for the best results, but a test still. It was to force the equally brutal and horrendous Japan to surrender. Also, they were important cities. They had large civilian populations, yes, but they were of military importance. Hiroshima was where they were making weapons and bombs for Japan. There were a lot of civilians, yes, but they were military targets. You don't get to use civilians as a shield. Pearl Harbor was a military installation, even though it had a sizable civilian population there. Not that that mattered, because Japan did the whole rape of Nanking in China, but regardless, the two cities were of importance to the Japanese military. You may not like that, but they were, hence why they were chosen. Yes, the large population helped in the decision, I won't deny that, but that wasn't the main reason.
The United States remains the only nation on Earth to have used nuclear weapons against other human beings. According to a report by the New York Times, the United States launched at least 81 overt or covert interventions between 1946 and 2000. Latin America was of particular interest, and saw regime change projects in Nicaragua, Honduras, Panama, Mexico, and the Dominican Republic. Then you had the 1953 CIA-backed coup in Iran, which deposed the left-leaning, democratically elected President Mossadegh and reinstalled the despotic Shah.
Okay, but not to toot my own horn here, but they also impacted the bottom line of British Petroleum. I don't know if...
Oh my god, Hasan, you're throwing the argument that actually works away by trying to be funny. Just stop talking, you insufferable brat.
You know this, but those were our oil refineries, and then Mossadegh was saying that those oil refineries should be nationalized and profits should go back to the Iranian people. And guess what? That was an investment that we made, and America and England was willing to defend said investment of British Petroleum. Sorry, sucks to suck.
What are you even trying to say here? You just said that the US did that to screw the British over. Why would the British agree to anything then, you stupid, stupid man?
You shouldn't have had a resource-rich nation if you wanted to not be exploited.
As we'll see shortly, the CIA becomes especially vital to US meddling in this period.
This was just how the world was at the time. I'm not justifying anything, but let's not pretend other countries, nations, and factions weren't also trying to one-up each other in the Cold War. Like, come on, dude. There's an actual argument to make, but you're missing it because you don't want to talk about why these things happened.
Another one of their pet projects was trying to assassinate Fidel Castro, the revolutionary leader of Cuba. They made at least 668 attempts to eliminate the beloved leader.
I'm not surprised a socialist thinks Castro would be beloved.
Trying everything from poison to gunmen to Looney Tunes-style exploding cigars. Despite the CIA's best efforts, Castro lived a long, healthy life, finally passing away in 2016. Perhaps the most infamous US intervention of the era was the 1973 coup in Chile. In early September 1970, the people of Chile elected the democratic socialist Salvador Allende as president.
Again, classic socialism doesn't work. It's just like, when will you liberals understand? Socialism doesn't work because it disturbs people in positions of power that are going to go and do everything they can if you even democratically elect a socialist.
Rich coming from you, a millionaire socialist who drives expensive cars and lives in a secluded, gated community.
If you do a people's revolution, if you do a people's back revolution against a brutal dictatorship, well, guess what? We were working with those guys. Turns out we don't like that. We don't like when you do that. If you actually democratically elect someone into a position of power and they call themselves socialists, well, we don't like that too. We're going to do everything we can to actually make sure that you understand that socialism doesn't work.
Look, again, I'm not justifying anything, but the whole reason these things happened was to try to stop the Soviets from getting a leg up over us. It's wrong, but no one was clean here. Everyone was guilty. So actually look at the history of the world before you go off on these unhinged rants.
Okay? It doesn't work. That's why we have to show everyone it doesn't work by doing everything we can.
I mean, you clearly know it doesn't work because you're not going out there helping your fellow man. You're profiting off an audience of retards who think they know what socialism is.
The United States and the late Henry Kissinger didn't like that. A few months before the election, he had said, quote, "I don't see why we need to stand idly by and watch a country go communist due to the irresponsibility of its own people." This was the empire's philosophy in a nutshell. On September...
The US has never been and never will be an empire. Oh my god, dude. I need a fucking break. How am I not halfway done with this stupid video yet?
11th, 1973, the presidential palace was bombed, seized, and after delivering a brief speech full of hope for the future of Chile...
Just saying, if they knew what was good for themselves, they wouldn't have done that, right? It's so irresponsible for them to vote for things like that.
In Korea, what's often referred to as the Forgotten War here in the United States, the US killed between 2 and 3 million civilians.
I just can't believe this stupidity. You know how many countries were fighting in Korea? There were at least 16 countries fighting alongside South Korea, and at least 14 other countries giving Korea some sort of support. On the opposite side, 8 different countries were supporting North Korea, one of which was China. So don't you fucking dare say it was just the US who killed 2 million civilians in the Korean War, because that's statistically impossible with how many countries and soldiers were there. Even if it was just the US and South Korea fighting North Korea alone, it's still statistically impossible for the US to have been solely behind every single civilian casualty of that war. God damn, dude.
The North lost a full 20% of its population, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that Korea is the Forgotten War. It's not that we've forgotten, it's that our government doesn't like to remind us that they slaughtered millions of people just so capitalism wouldn't have to contend with an economic challenge.
Oh my fucking god, I can't believe this. Look, everything up to this point is ill-informed at best. Maybe he just misinterpreted the context, or was just summarizing everything so that he could more easily explain his points. Whatever, he's still wrong, but maybe it was an honest mistake. But this? Second thought is an idiot. How do you miss the entire reason of the Korean War? I find it so ironic he complained about how the white settlers persecuted and pushed the Native Americans from their homes, and then turns around and completely misses that it was the North in Korea who started the Korean War because China and Russia wanted Korea to be a part of the Warsaw Pact. The US was there because South Korea was our ally, and they were being invaded. It wasn't because the US was trying to push anti-communist rhetoric in the people, though that did happen. It was because their ally was at war. How stupid do you have to be to think that way? It was the war of northern aggression. Holy crap, dude. You missed every fucking mark because you've been drinking the Kool-Aid uninformed and uneducated liberals screech because it gives them attention on social media. Like, I'm actually really upset here. The hypocrisy, the irony, and the stupidity is pissing me off to no end. Second Thought has no idea what he's talking about, and Hasan is legitimately too stupid to know that this is wrong information. Setting aside the stupidity of basing the past on modern-day politics, how stupid do you have to be to look at a country with a very rich history and cherry-pick the bad things that happened in that country's history? Like, if you're not even going to talk about the good things the country has done and only focus on the bad things and then make up bad things to go along with your arguments, you're just creating a false narrative. Like, the few examples you had that are actual arguments, not that that even really matters because that happened 200 years ago and times have changed drastically, you don't even focus on them, and instead you go off and pick examples that aren't examples, but you leave out information or lie about them to front your argument. You're a hack. You don't know what you're talking about, and you're instead using it to radicalize your left-wing retards to complain about issues they know nothing about.
Sure.
But again, in that situation, it's also a American invention. The 38th parallel is disrupted by the North Koreans. Again, another political designation that's just like totally cultivated to fit America's needs.
What the fuck are you talking about, Hasan?
So,
And these are just 2 of the more well-known proxy conflicts during the Cold War. But there were many, many more, and they remain a favorite tool of the US empire to this day.
The funniest
Oh my god, dude, the US is not an empire.
parts about that is that, like, well, with the exception of, I guess, Korea, which many people don't even talk about, every single thing that he's mentioned, even like the prevailing liberal attitude now, because we are so far removed from it, is that it was actually bad. The liberal position is always like, yeah, everything we did in the past, sure, that was bad. I will give it to you. That wasn't good. But what we're doing right now, which is identical to everything that we did in the past, right now, that's good. We have to do that. Always.
What are you talking about? What are we doing now that's even remotely comparable to ethnic cleansings or having the CIA install a puppet state?
And if you go against that and go, hold on, maybe we should just dial it back a little bit and really assess, then your politics are just America bad. That's all it is. Your politics are only America bad. Have you considered that maybe America good? Have you considered that maybe like the people that we are bombing they hate gay people, or they have really horrible conditions? They have really horrible workplace safety violations, you know? They don't have good labor unions. And a whole bunch of stuff that I've also made up now because I can do that, because who's going to check? There's no coverage in the living conditions of the people on the ground. Yeah, liberals hate every war but this one, love every civil rights movement but this one.
Casualties without
I just don't even know what he's trying to say anymore.
talking about the Iraq War. Today, 20 years after the start of the so-called War on Terror, it's no longer controversial to say that the Iraq War was started based on a lie. This is a well-established fact. Anyone who tries to say otherwise is either in complete denial or is acting in bad faith. For the younger
Ironic statement.
viewers in the audience, the United States made a big show of saying they had proof Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. They did not. And so based on false testimonies that served the interests of empire,
I don't know why this upsets me so much, but stop calling the US the Empire. They aren't the Empire. Yes, the Empire in Star Wars took a lot of inspiration from the United States, but that does not make them equivalent to each other.
the United States invaded Iraq and occupied it for years. What was once a vibrant, thriving nation was obliterated
That is debatable at best.
in what were called shock and awe campaigns. The US military targeted communications, electricity, vital infrastructure such as roads, bridges.
The Iraq War is the perfect example of like how ridiculous this is, because the guys who did it 100% were talking about how we must do it over and over again, okay? Dick Cheney and the like, for years before we actually invaded, for a multitude of different reasons, okay? And like still to this day, the defense of it at the time and still to this day from the reasonable foreign policy blob was that, well, you know, Saddam's actions against the Kurds in the country were unimaginable. They were really horrifying, and there's truth to that, for the record, right?
I'm honestly surprised he even agrees that Saddam was a horrible person.
Right? Historically speaking, there was so much that Saddam had done. He's a bad guy. What are you, defending Saddam? And it's like infinitely worse to Iraq than Saddam could have ever imagined. Like, what are you talking about? This should be such a formative point in recent American history. That's a little wild. It's wild to say that America's invasion, illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq, is infinitely worse than what Saddam could have ever done to...
I don't even know what to say anymore. Holy crap. I'm not defending the US when it went to Iraq, but holy crap, dude.
Iraq? That is not a contentious point. What are you talking about? This is the problem. Why were libs so anti-Iraq war at the time? Was it just Bush? I don't get it. There was still the remaining factions of like anti-war liberalism that were anti-Bush. And Barack Obama's administration absolutely destroyed that. Because Obama came in on an anti-Iraq war slant and then did the surge. And when you do that, and this is something I talk about all the time, liberals calcify the reactionary agenda. Liberals normalize the reactionary agenda. When George W. Bush, a reactionary Republican, is engaging in war, and then a liberal comes in, nobody was anti-war Iraq war at the time. It was like 90% support at the beginning. That is also what you're describing is not dissimilar to the origins of the anti-Israel's genocide of Palestinians.
Oh boy, I was wondering when this was going to come up. No, Israel is not committing a genocide in Palestine. Palestinian birth rates have only been rising. Yes, Palestinians are an oppressed minority compared to Israel, but they're not being genocided. They never have been, at least not by Israel. Sure, I guess you could argue what Israel is doing in Gaza right now is questionable, but there's really not much of a choice for them. Hamas has decided to put militants in a civilian population. They attack from civilian houses and wear civilian clothing. That alone is a war crime. Just because civilians are present does not mean that they are exempt from warfare happening around them. I'm pro-Palestine, but I'm pro-Palestine for different reasons than most other people are, because I actually know the history of that area a lot more than most other people who are pro-Palestinian. I'm not an expert on it, but I know the nuances and the history of it at least. But this is off topic. I'm sorry for that.
I hope you understand that. There were still absolutely voices and protests all the time, all over. They were just not getting coverage. There was no consideration for it. Every single person that actually stood against the invasion of Iraq considered anti-American, terror lovers, terrorist supporters. I mean, that's it. Something to remember is that, yes, there were still voices that were anti-Iraq war, and they were yelled at in almost the same exact ways that people are yelled at now.
Anything they could do to inflict maximum suffering. Over the course of the war, the US killed at least 1 million Iraqis. But beyond the evil of starting the war under false pretenses was the even more unspeakable evil of Abu Ghraib. This secret prison was operated by US personnel who engaged in torture, sexual assault, and other war crimes. I can't even show the unblurred images here, but I'm sure you recognize—
This is an actual argument against the United States. Congratulations, you finally did it, Second Thought. It took you a while, but you actually found a legitimate argument that you could attempt to make this against the United States. Let's give him a hand, everyone. He did it. Please, just don't move past this. Let's talk about it.
The most recognizable one.
Some of them just from the silhouette. That's how infamous this prison was. Over the last few months, the Israeli occupation—
Well, that was fun while it lasted.
has drastically ramped up its genocide of the Palestinian.
It's not a genocide. Sorry, but under no definition of what's happening in that area is genocidal. In fact, if anything, it's Hamas that wants to do the genocide.
People, using a surprise attack by the Palestinian resistance as justification. To be clear, this violence did not start on October 7th. The Palestinian people have been subjected to brutal colonial cruelty for the past 75 years.
Oh boy, I can't wait for this moron to try to talk about this war now. Somehow this has to do with America. The fact he called them the Palestinian resistance tells me everything I need to know about what he's going to say next. That was Hamas. That was a terrorist organization, not a resistance movement. Under no definition is Hamas a resistance movement. They target civilians. Resistances do not target civilians.
It's not a complex issue. If you don't feel confident enough—
It is a very complex issue.
to take a position yet, that's perfectly fine. I would just ask that you educate yourself on the subject, because this is
ironic.
one of those issues where people decades from now will look back and say, how did decent people watch this happen and do nothing?
What is even your point, dude? Nothing's stopping you from joining Hamas and fighting against those oppressive Jews. There's nothing stopping you from lending as much support as you want to terrorists. Actually, there is. But he could join them if you feel so heavily about it. I noticed, too, he's ignoring the U.S. helping Ukraine out. Actually, now that I think about it, he ignored some actual arguments he could have made, such as Vietnam and Afghanistan, but he just didn't talk about them.
Israel is a client state of the US. It serves as a vital geopolitical foothold in the region. That's literally the only reason the US cares about Israel.
That's just not even close to true at all. First, the US, alongside the British, have constantly been trying to push for good relations between Israel and its neighbors. Throughout Israel's wars with Palestine, the U.S. has tried again and again and again and again to get Israel and Palestine to exist as a two-party state. Part of the reason the U.S. has such close ties with Israel is because Israel was a major ally during the Cold War. This has to do with the Soviet Union trying to ally themselves with the Arab states. Like, okay, fine, sure, the U.S. likes Israel because Israel helped them out in that region of the world, but there's a lot more to it than just that.
Regardless of how elected officials try to sell it. Don't believe me? Here's current President Joe Biden back in 1986.
There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect.
Are you serious right now? I mean, I'm not surprised, but are you really going to use a politician's statement from 1986 and use that as concrete proof the United States only likes this country today?
Her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
The U.S. provides Israel with funding, weapons, ammunition, equipment for their missile defense system, and most importantly, unconditional support for their genocidal project.
As I have already stated, it is not a genocide. Nothing that is happening is by any definition a genocide.
This is why I say, like, there is definitely a slight deviation from other administrations, definitely Democratic administrations, but the slight deviation in this circumstance is that, like, the Biden camp and the voices that Joe Biden is listening to on Israel are so nutty that it is harming America's soft power globally. I'm telling you, there is no moral reason to defend Israel. We all know.
Oh my god, dude, that's amazing, actually. Because Hasan will be just as quick to call you anti-Semitic for criticizing someone who's Jewish. But the Jewish state, there's no reason to care about them at all. I can't believe this, man.
That already. Israel is doing an ethnic cleansing campaign. Israel's an apartheid regime. It's immoral. It's reprehensible. It's indefensible. But it's also not even pragmatic if your goal is to reinforce American dominance. It's not
It's almost like the U.S. isn't trying to assert its dominance in the world.
even pragmatic if your goal is to get reelected. Like, that's the crazy part about this, is that Biden is aligning with both MBS in Saudi Arabia and Netanyahu in Israel, two figures that despise him and have openly said that they do things that might even harm his reelection campaigns in the midst of a reelection campaign where he is phenomenally unpopular. It makes no sense. And I think it's partially because his brain is so perma-stuck all the way back at a time when, like, Israel was the mighty heroes in the Middle East that, like, conquered all the Arab barbarians that try to take it down.
Please, I'm begging you, just do a little research on the Arab-Israel wars, please.
Brandon is many things, but do I think he's personally like a baby eater or whatever? Absolutely not. Like, a Bill Clinton type is way closer to a baby eater than Joe Brandon. Joe Brandon is a die-in-the-wool liberal who believes it, okay? He's always positioned himself as, like, the middle ground Democrat, genuinely believes in a lot of the things he says. Because let me tell you why. Okay, let me tell you why I think this way. First of all, he's always been a liberal Zionist, 100% through and through. But beyond that, I always go back to the fact that he was he's a senator from Delaware, one of the most corrupt states in America. It's basically like the Cayman Islands, but inside of the United States borders, at a time when, like, every other state wasn't like that, right? Now, most states are tax havens, but we won't even get to that. At the time, he was always about financial deregulation. He was a big advocate for financial deregulation. He had an incredibly long career in Congress, and yet, by the time he had made it to the vice presidency, he still didn't have enough money to pay for his son's cancer treatment. Think about that. Like, to me, that spells that you are just, like, you're doing it for the love of the game. Not even doing it for the bribery that, not even doing it because you can make out like a bandit, get some cushy consulting gigs or whatever. Just straight up love of the game, okay? You want the power for the sake of power, but you also personally love, like, the idea of, neoliberalism being controlled by the Democratic Party.
Elected officials are very nearly unanimous in their defense of the apartheid regime, including one-time progressive champion Bernie
It's almost like there's lots of nuance to that war.
Sanders.
I gotta pee.
U.S. media uncritically repeats Israeli propaganda 24/7, despite all of it being debunked.
Oh, no, honey. All of it's been debunked? Are you serious? Every single thing that Israel says is just a flat-out lie, and everything that Hamas says is true. Are you kidding me? Also, this is just something Hasan does. He just leaves his stream while the video is playing, not even giving his personal thoughts on the subject. That's wrong, but, like, I can't believe he did this on a video that's his friend, too.
Including by intergovernmental bodies like the UN and humanitarian groups like Doctors Without Borders. Just a few weeks ago, the UN voted on a resolution to demand an immediate ceasefire. Of the 193 member states, only 10 voted against the resolution. Among them, the United States.
And that proves what exactly?
Many people, myself included, believe that this unconscionable backing of the most explicit genocide in modern history will be the nail in the coffin of US legitimacy abroad. No country—
Oh, I'm sure you and a lot of other Americans think that because it's not a genocide, and you clearly have no idea why there's even been ongoing wars in that area in the first place. But no, please do tell me how the US voting against one of its closest allies to try to negotiate a ceasefire with a terrorist group who only wants to kill Jews is going to somehow make European countries ask the US to stop supporting them.
on Earth beyond our Western European vassals will ever again believe a word the US says about freedom, democracy, human rights, or self-determination.
That doesn't even make sense as part of his argument. What's he even trying to say here?
The only difference between the United States and Israel is that the genocide of Native Americans was almost absolute, and
Ooh, boy, that's fucking rich, dude. Alright, first of all, I guess we just need to ignore a couple of things, such as the fact that Native Americans were also being attacked not only by themselves, but also the English, the French, the Porch, the Spanish, and the Prussians. Second, Israel has failed at its attempts to genocide Palestinians because they're not trying to genocide Palestine, you idiot.
Israel hasn't achieved that goal yet. There's a reason Hitler spoke so highly of US colonization efforts. It was complete extermination,
Except it never was a complete extermination. Native American tribes are still around. One of my best friends is Navajo. The US may have killed off dozens of tribes, God rest their soul, but it wasn't a complete extermination. Also, has it ever crossed your mind that Hitler might have lied to his people when he said stuff like that to help push his justification for killing Jews and other undesirables? Also, the US is far from the worst country to have participated in colonialism. You know England exists, right? You know that most countries in the world are independent countries because of England, right?
I guarantee you the same arguments we're hearing today from defenders of the Israeli genocide of Palestinians were used to justify the atrocities committed in North America.
Jesus Christ, dude.
Just about everyone agrees that what the European colonizers did to the Native Americans was wrong, and now a couple hundred years later we're doing land acknowledgements and pretending it was always unanimous that the genocide was bad. The same thing is happening with the genocide in Palestine.
It's not a genocide, though. Palestinian birth rates have only risen. There are more Palestinians now than there has ever been before.
Well, that was grim. It's always hard making these videos.
The answer is yes, we are the bad.
No, Hasan, just because you're a piece of shit does not mean the rest of the country is a piece of shit. Just because you're a narcissistic asshole does not mean the country you live in is too.
Guys, but you don't have to be. That should be your takeaway from this. While America are the bad guys.
The bad guys to who, Hasan? You're living here, aren't you? You're profiting off the US culture. The world is not split in black and white. The faster you stop seeing the world as black and white, the faster you'll be happy in the world. So again, the bad guys to who? Daddy Putin? Father Pooh Bear?
Guys, you have the choice and the decision to be on the right side of history. And you can do that. We all have that power. I personally believe that I do that every day, okay?
I'm sure you do, buddy. I'm sure you think you're going down in the history books as some sort of American hero.
And plenty of you in this community also do that every day. This does not mean that you hate Americans. This does not mean that you hate America as a concept. That's why I live here. This is something I mention all the time. I used to mention it way more frequently.
No, you live here because you can get away with saying things like that while also sucking off the tits of China and Russia and other dictatorship countries from the safety of your mansion in your gated community.
Okay, people love saying, Hasan, you hate America. And it's like, listen, I'm profoundly fortunate, okay?
That's one way to put it.
I'm so goddamn fortunate that I had affluent beginnings so I could actually come to America with ease. And even then, there was still a lot of hardships associated with that in comparison to a person who was just simply born here. I chose to be here, okay? I worked to be here. Many of you that are in America didn't, okay? This is before we even talk about so many people who work infinitely harder than myself to get here, okay? Infinitely. So whenever people say, oh, dude, like, you hate America, it's just America bad, why don't you leave? And it's like, so frequently, I hear this from Republicans all the time. I still hear it nonstop, but I now hear it from liberals too. But they try to, sauce it up in an intellectual way, I guess. And the issue is, it's because I like America, and it's because I see the potential of America, that I want to try and do my very best, as it is my moral duty, to make sure that America at least dials it back as best as I possibly can push for. When I advocate...
Dials what back? Please tell me, what does America do now that makes it the bad guys? Neither person has actually said why they're the bad guys. They've instead only looked at surface level things and made that their argument. But they didn't actually explain or talk about why this makes the US bad, when many other countries do and have done this to a much worse degree. Hasan is a supporter of China, and yet China is actively participating in genocides right now. He also likes Russia, despite Russia trying to ethnically cleanse Ukraine.
Advocate for universal health care, it's not because I want America to destroy itself. When I advocate for free college education, it's not because I hate America, it's because I want Americans to have a life of meaning, a life of dignity. I want the real American dream that was promised to people. And I know we have the wealth, we have the finances to make it work. And it's very, very, very frustrating when people try to engage in team sports, unironically end up identifying with the enemy team. If you consider Republicans and reactionaries to be the enemy team, then why are you identifying with their positions? Why are you criticizing people from the exact same perspective? When it comes to American foreign policy, many people fall into this trap.
I didn't even mention the CIA's domestic operations, or Operation Paperclip, or the embargo on Cuba, or the UN resolutions that show the US being the sole vote against classifying food as a human right.
Ooh, I was waiting for this one. I love that topic. You know why the US voted against food being a human right? Because the US would have to be the ones who distribute the food and grow the food. But not only that, they'd have to somehow convince corrupt and hostile countries to let them come in and distribute food to the starving population. Countries that have these starving populations because of that country's leadership neglecting the people. Plus, that's not even something you can claim as a right. How do you make it a human right to always get food? What does that even mean? Does that mean everyone is going to get shipments of canned goods every month? What if that person has a food allergy? What's stopping those in other countries from taking all that extra free food and hoarding it for themselves? Nothing. Because you can't make that a human right and expect leading bodies in these horrible countries to follow that when they're already violating the rights of their people in the first place. And, as I mentioned, the cost of that would be exorbitantly massive and would be impossible to pull off. We need millions of acres of land to farm on now, something we do not have. But no, the US is actually being smart about this subject, makes them the bad guys.
Or any number of other things. The bottom line is this. There is a reality that we are not exposed to here in the United States. There's a reason the majority of the world hates us.
Oh no, please do tell. Why does the majority of the world hate us? If that's true, why are so many people coming into the United States every day trying to get a chance at a better life?
Not us specifically, but the nation, the flag on the invader's uniform. The United States is the single greatest barrier to progress in the world, bar none. This country is responsible for some of the most reprehensible crimes against humanity the world has ever.
Oh? And what are these crimes? Let's see. The only one we can really look at is maybe Iraq, which is highly tame compared to Japan in World War II. Let's see. Yeah, what happened to the natives was bad, but that wasn't nearly as bad as the Spanish and Porch in South America. The Philippines was bad, but relatively minor. Yeah, I'm not seeing it, Chief. Please do enlighten me on how the U.S. has committed the worst crimes against humanity, because the examples you showed here are not them. I mean, just a simple look at history shows that Germany, Russia, Japan, and Mongolia are much, much more evil than the U.S. ever was.
Seen. If you're thinking, but it says right here in my history book that the good guys won every war, maybe it's time to think about who writes the history books and what interests benefit from the American people remaining uneducated and blindly patriotic.
I mean, yeah, but heed your own advice, buddy, because you're clearly as uneducated as those you think are uneducated.
You and I may be good people, but as the United States of America, yeah, we're the bad guys.
Again, the bad guys to whom? The ones who hate us because we represent a threat to their dictatorships? The religious fundamentalists who view us as a threat to them spreading their fanatical messages to the desperate masses? Or the ones who are jealous of the United States being a beacon of hope to millions, if not billions of people? There's a lot of issues within the United States that need addressing. You missed every single one of them. You took what could have been an informative discussion and threw it all out the window because you're too stupid to actually formulate an argument. You took things that happened in the past and instead of trying to use modern examples, pick topics you don't understand and try to use that as proof. No wonder the right thinks you guys are insane.